So music theory, week one review. Here's what we talked about in class. We talked about parts of a note. So remember, we start with a note head. Every note has a note head, and note heads can be either empty, not filled in, or filled in. So that's the first part. Next, we move to stems. Not every note head will have a stem, but I would say most do. Stems can also either go down and they're placed on the left side of the note, or they go up and they're placed on the right side of the note. We talked about flags. So flags will be attached to the stem, and they always go the direction towards the right. And then when we have multiple flag notes in a row, then we connect them with a horizontal line called beams. So those are parts of a note. Next, we're going to talk about clef signs. So we have two different clefs that we're going to talk about here. The first one is what we call the treble clef, also known as G clef, because the swoosh, as Mr. Fretland calls it, goes around the second line in the treble clef, which is the note G. So this is called treble clef, also known as G clef. The next clef that we're going to talk about, and the final clef that we talk about, is the bass clef. The bass clef starts on the fourth line, and it has two dots that are on either side of the fourth line. And that note in bass clef is the note F. So we refer to this clef sign as the bass clef or F clef. You should definitely be familiar with both names of each clef. F clef, bass clef, treble clef, G clef. Next thing we're going to talk about is identifying different notes. So the first thing we should talk about is our musical alphabet. Remember, we always start with the letter A, and then we go straight through the alphabet until we get to the letter G, and then we start over again with A. And we can just keep going. So we need to talk about lines and spaces. As we go up and ascend up to the top of the music staff, we go forward in the musical alphabet. And as we go down the music staff, then we go backwards. So up equals forward, and then down equals backward. So that's important to know. So let's just take an example here. In our bass clef, here's the note F, which is on the fourth line. So I'm going to go down 2 spaces from F. So if we start at F, remember, every line space that we go goes backwards 1 step, 1 letter in the alphabet. So F was a line note. So the next space note will be E. The next line will be D. And then we've reached our target note right there in that space, which is the note C. Let's try one for treble clef as well. So we're going to start with G, which is on the second line, and we're going to draw a note all the way up to the top line. That's the 5th line if we're counting from the bottom up. So we start on G, and G is a line note. So we're going to go, the next space is going to be A, line is B, space is C, line is D, space is E, and then we've reached the top note, which is F. So you want to be familiar with the lines and the spaces, both in treble clef and in bass clef. All right, really the final topic that we're going to talk about now is time signatures. I'm going to make some room here. So time signatures, we have a top number and a bottom number. The top number always tells us how many beats there are in each measure. And really, we're not limited with any number in the top. So it could be 4, it could be 16, could be 20, could be 1, could be 2. So the top number always tells us how many beats per measure. The bottom number, we do have more limitations with what we can do with that. And that tells us which type of a note equals 1 beat. So we're limited to only the type of fractions of notes that we encounter in music. So the numbers that we could see on the bottom would be 1, which would refer to a whole note, 2, which would refer to a half note, 4, which would be like a quarter note, 8 would be an eighth note, 16 would be a 16th note, 32, and so on, all of those different multiples. So a couple of examples. If we see 4 over 4 in our time signature, that would mean that we have 4 beats in a measure, and the quarter note would get 1 beat. Remember, Mr. Fretland talked in class about thinking about these like a fraction. So you can say the bottom number as a fraction, a fourth. Remember, there's no type of note really as a fourth note, but we call it a quarter note rather. So we could do, how about 12 over 8? That would be 12 beats in a measure, and then the eighth note would get 1 beat. We could see something like this, 3, 2 in our time signature. That would be 3 beats in a measure. The half note gets 1 beat. Or we could see something even kind of crazy like this, 15 over 16. So that would be 15 beats in a measure, and then the 16th note would receive 1 beat. So that's it. That's theory review for week 1, and we'll be back with week number 2.